I found out that my brother and my fiancée had slept together, a betrayal that shook the very foundation of my trust. Even more painful, my parents, fully aware of the affair, now expect me to forgive and forget, as if erasing the hurt is as simple as a whispered command. Their demand leaves me torn between familial loyalty and the undeniable need to honor my own dignity, a struggle that redefines everything I once believed about love and betrayal. I grew up in a small town outside Milwaukee, where family was my rock. We always talked things out, and there was never a long silence between us. My brother Dylan and I were inseparable despite the usual rivalry between two guys sharing a home. He, a year younger, was always compared to me, seen as the charming free spirit, while I was the one who always had a plan. Our sister Mia, the baby of the family, was like an extra part of our mother, soaking up all the attention. My parents, Claire and Joe, were the typical Midwestern duo. My mom managed the house with a steady hand, and my dad spent his time telling jokes and grilling, as if it were his personal hobby. I thought I had everything: a stable family, siblings I could trust, and a fiancée who I believed was my soulmate. Emma entered my life during a group project in junior year at W. Madison. With magnetic energy, ambition, and irresistible confidence, she captured my admiration, and I fell hard for her. By semester's end, we were a couple. The relationship was a whirlwind, but I didn't question it because everything felt perfect. I pictured a future of shared accomplishments, children, and a life together. One crisp November night, I got down on one knee, and she said yes. We planned a wedding for the next summer, and I felt I was finally living the dream. But in March, everything unraveled. On an ordinary Friday during a slow work shift, I decided to surprise Emma with her favorite meal to spend a cozy evening together. When I got to our apartment, something was off. Her slippers sat by the door, but the silence was eerie, except for soft giggles coming from the bedroom. I assumed she might be watching a funny video or on a call. However, when I opened the bedroom door, my world shattered. There, I found Emma and Dylan together in bed. Emma was wearing the oversized Valentine's Day t-shirt I'd given her, the one with the cheesy heart print. The proof was undeniable. They both froze like deer in headlights. The silence in that room said it all. Dylan, my own brother, stammered out, "It's not what it looks like." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it, while Emma said nothing, hastily covering herself with a blanket as if that could erase the betrayal. In a calm but firm voice, I ordered Emma, "Pack your things and leave." I wasn't interested in excuses or remorse. Sleeping with my own brother's fiancée was unforgivable. Without waiting for more explanations, I left the apartment and drove to a friend's place. Lying awake that night, I couldn't escape the harsh truth. My fiancée, the woman I planned to marry, and my trusted brother had both betrayed me in the worst way possible. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a deliberate destruction of something I held dear. The next day, while I was still processing the shock, Emma moved out as I told her. When I returned home that night, I found a note on the counter, right where our framed photo once stood. In it, Emma admitted she'd fallen in love with Dylan and claimed she never meant to hurt me, adding a ludicrous wish that someday I could be happy for them. I wanted to laugh, but only uncontrollable rage filled me. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. There was nothing left to say. The apartment, now empty of her things, became a stage highlighting the void of someone I no longer wanted in my life. News spread quickly through the family. Either Emma or Dylan must have told someone. My mom, Claire, was the first to call, not to comfort me, but to scold Dylan, repeatedly calling him unworthy and making it clear he wasn't welcome at home. Initially, I found some solace in her support, but I wasn't naive. I knew her loyalty was conditional and that she would eventually defend Dylan. My dad, Joe, reacted with a disturbing calm. When I finally answered one of his calls, he simply sighed and remarked, "Well, these things happen sometimes," as if the situation were as trivial as Dylan spilling coffee on his shirt. My sister Mia reached out in disbelief, her voice mixed with both my pain and a reluctant loyalty to the family. For weeks, I ignored calls. I wasn't ready to relive the betrayal or listen to excuses urging me to let it go. I threw myself into work, which was the only thing keeping me sane. It was during this time that my boss, Kevin, noticed my overtime hours and asked if I was all right. Without revealing the full story, I mentioned I was dealing with personal issues. That's when he told me about the team leader position at the Indianapolis office, a role that had been open for a while. He thought I was the perfect candidate, an opportunity not just for a promotion, but also a way to escape Milwaukee and the mess that Emma and Dylan had created. I accepted the offer without hesitation. When I told my parents about my move, my dad was supportive, suggesting a fresh start might be exactly what I needed. But my mom reacted as though I had announced I was leaving for another planet. In tears, she begged me to reconsider, worried about missing family gatherings and holidays. "How can you leave us behind, Alex?" she pleaded. I explained it wasn't about abandoning the family. It was about leaving Dylan behind, since he was no longer part of it. Despite her passionate words about family unity, I knew her actions often contradicted her promises. By July, my suspicions were confirmed. Dylan had returned one night, and my mom casually informed me that they decided to let him stay because he had nowhere else to go. She acted as if nothing had happened, as if the person who had betrayed me was just another member of the family, all while expecting me at Sunday dinners. I didn't hide my anger. I told her bluntly that it felt like a slap in the face that she chose him over me. She tried to justify it by saying he was still my son, someone she couldn't reject. I snapped back. "Well, he's not my brother anymore, and I want nothing to do with him." That's when she launched into her usual talk of family unity, insisting we needed to heal and move on together. A thinly veiled plea for me to forgive Dylan so she wouldn't feel guilty about letting him back in. I wasn't buying it. I told her plainly that I wasn't interested in faking healing or pretending everything was fine. I wanted to end this illusion of family unity. I even said that if she kept enabling the person who ruined everything, she might as well stop rewarding him. Then I hung up. After that conversation, I distanced myself. I focused on getting ready for my move to Indianapolis. I found a new place, packed up my apartment, and started fresh in a city where no one knew my family or my past. Leaving Milwaukee wasn't easy. I had cherished memories there, and part of me felt that by leaving, I was letting Dylan and Emma win. But staying meant every street, restaurant, and memory would remind me of what I'd lost. Moving was my only chance to rebuild. By the time I left, I had nearly cut all ties with my family. I ignored their calls and messages. Even my attempts to stay neutral were forgotten. They'd chosen to welcome Dylan back, and I had decided to walk away. I didn't know what the future held, but I was determined to stop being the good son who always put family first. From that moment on, I focused on myself, rebuilding my life on my own terms. By September, I was settling into my new life in Indianapolis. Cutting family ties turned out to be the best decision, despite the pain it caused. Work was going well, I was making new friends, and the distance from the chaos was exactly what I needed. Then, one day, my mom, Claire, called about her upcoming birthday. She wanted me to come home to celebrate, and that call reopened old wounds I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I hesitated, knowing my relationship with her had been strained ever since she let Dylan back in, even though she repeatedly promised that only immediate family would be involved and that she missed day. Despite my better judgment, I agreed. On the long drive to my parents' house, I had ample time to question my decision. I convinced myself I was doing it for my mother, even though she had disappointed me. I thought maybe that, with just her, my father, and Mia, things wouldn't be so awful. However, upon arriving, something felt off. Too many cars were in the driveway, and my heart sank when I saw Dylan's car among them. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I considered turning back, but I refused to give my mother the satisfaction of seeing me retreat. I decided to go in, keep the visit short, and leave as soon as possible. As soon as I walked through the door, my mother greeted me with a wide, forced smile, as if nothing had happened. "Alex, I'm so glad you came," she said, wrapping me in a hug with an overwhelming energy, as if she could erase the past with pure will. I scanned the living room and saw them, Dylan and Emma, sitting on the couch, completely unfazed. Emma laughed uproariously at something Mia had said, her mirth unrestrained. Stunned, I asked quietly but firmly, "Why are they here?" Before my mother could respond, she took my arm and insisted we talk in the living room, as if that made everything any less terrible. In the living room, my mother launched into her usual talk about healing and family unity. She sat me down and explained how Dylan and Emma had made a mistake and were truly sorry, insisting that it was time to move on as a family. Dylan interjected with an effortless, "I'm sorry, man. It was an accident," as if he had just spilled coffee on my shirt rather than shattered my life. Emma added, "We never meant to hurt you," a statement that rang hollow coming from her. I watched them, trying to tell if they believed their own excuses, and found the idea of fixing everything laughable. I leaned forward, locked eyes with Dylan, and said, "You're a pathetic excuse for a brother." Then, turning to Emma, I added, "I hope he cheats on you. You deserve each other." A heavy silence fell over the room. My mother tried to intervene, but I wouldn't let her speak further. I stood, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "Enjoy your golden boy, and don't ever call me again." Without another word, I walked out, hearing my mother plead for calm and insisting I'd change my mind eventually. Dylan remained silent, and Emma just sat there. I got in my car and left, my mind racing with questions. How could my mother think this was acceptable? How could she expect me to just forgive and forget, as if it were a mere difference of opinion rather than a betrayal that had shattered my life? I spent the rest of the day trying to cool down, but the anger burned inside me, replaying every detail of the confrontation. I wanted to call my mother to vent, but I knew it would be pointless. She had already decided by letting Dylan and Emma back into her life. That night, I blocked her number and Dylan's too, even though he hadn't reached out in months. I was convinced that sooner or later, one of them would try to make amends, and I wasn't willing to face that for weeks. During that time, I buried myself in work, which became my sanctuary. My colleagues might have thought I was overly dedicated, but it was simply my way of channeling the frustration. I even stopped checking social media. Seeing pictures of my family only reminded me of everything that had happened. I convinced myself that I'd be better off without them. Even though the pain was still raw, knowing that those I trusted most had let me down so completely. Over time, I began to feel a little better. The distance helped, and gradually, I rebuilt my life. I told myself I didn't need them, that I could form my own version of family with people who truly cared. Yet deep down, I knew it wasn't over. My mother was never one to give up, and I suspected she'd find another way to pull me back into her family drama. For now, I preferred to focus on myself. Let them live in denial about what Dylan and Emma had done. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who didn't value me. January arrived, and my new life in Indianapolis became everything I'd dreamed of, an escape from the chaos my family had created. I no longer woke up brimming with anger. I had space to breathe, think, and focus on myself. That's when Sarah, a distant cousin, messaged me, signaling a new chapter in this ongoing saga. I barely knew Sarah. We had met only a few times at family gatherings, barely exchanging a few words. So when she suddenly said she was moving to Indianapolis and needed help settling in, I was immediately skeptical. Initially, I almost ignored her message. My experience with family taught me that getting involved in their affairs was always risky. But something in me felt sorry for her. Sarah hadn't hurt me, and maybe she didn't even understand the tangled mess my family had become. Plus, she seemed genuinely nervous about moving to an unfamiliar city. Against my better judgment, I agreed to help. The appointed weekend arrived, and I drove to the address she'd sent, a small apartment complex in a quiet part of town. Everything seemed normal until, as I parked, I saw a U-Haul truck and two familiar figures unloading boxes, Dylan and my father. For a moment, I froze, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My instinct screamed to leave, but before I could, the building's front door swung open, and my mother appeared. She recognized me immediately and waved as if we were at a family reunion, not a trap. "Alex, wait," she shouted as she ran toward my car. I parked and got out, but kept a safe distance. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, pointing at Dylan and my father, who stood awkwardly by the truck, unsure of what to do. My mother launched into her usual chatter about how Sarah needed help and how it made sense for the family to be together. But it was clear this wasn't about Sarah. It was another ploy to force reconciliation. Dylan, with his empty apologies, stepped forward, tears glistening in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Alex. I know I messed up. I just want to make things right," he said, his voice trembling as if auditioning for a play. I looked at him impassively. I'd heard that same act at my mother's birthday, and it was utterly pathetic. That's when my father intervened, saying in his typical condescending tone, "Alex, come on. Are you still holding on to this grudge? It's tearing the family apart." His words were meant to make me the bigger person, as if Dylan's mistakes were mere misunderstandings. That pushed me over the edge. He had no idea what it was like to feel betrayed by a brother, to lose not just a relationship, but trust in those closest to you. When my father put a hand on my shoulder, I reacted instinctively. My fist crashed into his face before I even realized what I was doing. The blow echoed sharply, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. My father recoiled, clutching his jaw in astonishment, while Dylan looked like he wished he could vanish, and my mother burst into tears. "Alex," she sobbed. "How could you?" Dylan mumbled something about me going too far, but I wasn't interested in arguing any further. I turned and headed for my car, over my shoulder declaring, "Don't follow me." Once home, I immediately blocked Sarah. I didn't care if she was part of a bigger plan or merely a pawn in my mother's schemes. I wanted nothing to do with her. Sitting on the couch that night, I tried to process everything. I wasn't proud of losing control, but I didn't regret it either. My father had crossed a line, and if a punch was what it took to show that I wouldn't be manipulated any longer, then so be it. The worst part was that nothing surprised me anymore. My mother would always protect Dylan, no matter the damage he caused, and my father preferred to keep the peace instead of facing real issues. I couldn't help but wonder how long they'd been planning this. Had they been coaxing Sarah to contact me for weeks, Or was it a last-minute scheme? It didn't matter anymore. I had decided to walk away before they could drag me back. The next morning, I woke with a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief because I'd stood my ground, and sadness because it was another stark reminder of how dysfunctional my family had become. They wouldn't see Dylan and Emma's betrayal for what it was, and they never would. I decided then to cut ties even further. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me or force me to be the glue holding their broken family together while they did whatever they wanted. My life in Indianapolis was good, and I wasn't going to let them ruin it. I owed them nothing. No closure, no forgiveness, no return to normal. I was tired of being the scapegoat. I was in a much better headspace when I began dating Hannah, who quickly became my anchor, kind, understanding, and always respectful of my boundaries. She knew about the family chaos and never pushed me to reconnect with them. Hannah's family lived in Chicago, and they invited me to spend Christmas with them for the first time in years. I was genuinely excited for the holidays. Her parents were warm and inviting. Her siblings were delightful, and the house was free of the tension and drama that had always marred my family gatherings. Then, a week before Christmas, I received a letter with unfamiliar handwriting that I nearly hesitated to open. When I did, my heart sank. It was from my mother, announcing that Dylan and Emma had gotten married and that my parents were now separated. She left out the reasons, instead pleading that the family needed me that Christmas, as if it were a chance to mend things and move forward. I read it twice, trying to figure out her true intent. Was she asking for my help, or just trying to cover up the damage Dylan had caused? The mention of the marriage felt like a harsh reminder that they had moved on without a second thought. I discussed the letter with Hannah, and she gently advised, "Alex, you don't owe them anything. If it's only going to hurt you, why force yourself to face it?" She was right, but a part of me still felt guilty, not for cutting ties, but for not being able to shake off the sense of obligation my mother had ingrained in me. Ultimately, I chose to spend Christmas with Hannah's family in a cozy home outside Chicago. From the moment I arrived, I knew it was the right decision. They greeted me with warm hugs, and her mother even fussed over whether I'd prefer hot chocolate or apple cider. It was a genuine and simple Christmas, a refreshing change from the stormy family gatherings of my past. We decorated the tree, baked cookies, and played board games, enjoying a conflict-free Christmas Eve. Christmas morning was just as peaceful, spent in pajamas, unwrapping presents, and finding a personalized stocking with my name, a small detail that made me feel truly included. Yet, amid that warmth, my thoughts drifted back to my family. I wondered what they were up to. Would my mother be home alone? Would my father find a way to celebrate? Or would Dylan and Emma show up, pretending everything was fine? I pushed those thoughts aside, determined not to let their drama steal my joy. In January, as I was getting back into my routine, I received an email from Mia, someone I hadn't heard from in months. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Mia wrote that my father was living in a motel and that Dylan and Emma were struggling financially. She didn't elaborate much, but hinted that Dylan's job was unstable and that Emma was unhappy in her marriage. I stared at the screen, puzzled by her motive. Was she fishing for sympathy or expecting me to fix their issues? I decided not to reply. What could I possibly say? I'm sorry, but it's not my problem. I wasn't about to let myself be dragged back into the chaos they'd created. No matter how tough their situation was, they'd made their choices and now had to face the fallout. A part of me even felt a slight vindication. Seeing them falter felt like poetic justice, not because I enjoyed their suffering, but because karma was finally catching up. That night, Hannah noticed I was unusually quiet and asked if I was okay. I told her about the email, and she said softly but firmly, "You've already done the hard part by moving on. Don't let them pull you back." She was absolutely right. I had invested too much in rebuilding my life to let their problems disturb my peace. I realized that my family's issues were no longer my burden. The next morning, I deleted Mia's email and blocked her address. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I wouldn't let guilt or pity pull them back into my life. Christmas with Hannah's family marked a turning point. For the first time, I understood what it meant to break free from the toxicity of my past. I no longer needed my family's approval or validation. I had found people who loved me for who I am, not for what I could do for them. The chaos of my past would no longer dictate my future. I had built a new life without looking back. By June, I was proud of my progress. Life in Indianapolis was stable, my relationship with Hannah was growing stronger every day, and my family had become a distant memory. I had blocked them, ignored every half-hearted attempt at communication, and focused solely on myself. But they weren't finished with me yet. One Saturday morning, as I was preparing for a run, I heard a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I looked through the peephole, I froze. It was Mia, whom I hadn't seen in over a year. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home, but I eventually opened the door. Without waiting for an invitation, she burst into tears, saying, "Alex, I'm so sorry. I should have defended you more. I should have done more." Her words caught me off guard. Mia had always been a passive presence in my life, never directly hurting me, but never taking my side either. Hearing her admit fault left me unsure of how to react. That night, I made it clear that I had cut ties with Dylan and Emma, and with my mom, as Mia added. Crossing my arms and leaning against the doorframe, I interrupted her. "What do you want, Mia?" After a moment of hesitation, as she wiped away her tears, she said, "I just want to talk. Dad wants to talk too. Can we meet, please?" My body wanted to shut the door and move on with my day, but Mia's desperate, pleading look made me hesitate, and I eventually agreed to meet her a few days later. We met at a small diner on the outskirts of town where Mia was already sitting with our father, Joe, a man I hadn't seen since I punched him in the face outside Sarah's apartment. The tension was thick. When he saw me, he got up and offered his hand, but I refused it and sat down across from them, waiting for someone to speak. "I am sorry," my dad finally whispered, "for everything. I should have protected you better. I should have acted differently." His apology, though small, exceeded my expectations, and for a moment, I felt a spark of hope that maybe things could be mended. But then the diner door opened, and my mom walked in. I tensed immediately. My dad, clearly embarrassed, muttered, "She wanted to come, didn't she?" as if that justified her intrusion. And sure enough, right behind her were Dylan and Emma. I stood up, ready to leave, but Mia grabbed my arm and pleaded, "Please, Alex, listen to them." That was the last straw. I stood up again and, interrupting my mom before she could speak, said in a cold, firm voice, "You are no longer my family. If you're looking for forgiveness, look elsewhere. I'm done." I left some coins on the table for my coffee and walked out, ignoring the shouts and pleas behind me. At that moment, I knew there was no turning back. They could cry, beg, or plead, but I was no longer their scapegoat. At 28, it feels like I've lived several lifetimes since the family chaos began. Looking back, it almost seems like it was someone else's story, but the scars remind me it was all too real. The good news is that I've emerged stronger, wiser, and surrounded by people who truly love me. Last year, Hannah and I got engaged in a simple ceremony at our favorite park in Indianapolis. We didn't need a grand celebration because I learned that true love doesn't require spectacle. When I proposed, she cried and instantly said yes, completing the puzzle I'd been trying to piece together since everything fell apart. Hannah, my fiancée, is my partner in every way, and with her, I feel secure in a way I never imagined possible. After what Dylan and Emma did, the biggest news is that we're expecting our first child, a boy. Every time I think about holding him for the first time, a mix of excitement and nerves washes over me. I never thought I'd be ready for fatherhood after my chaotic childhood, but Hannah's confidence in us gives me hope that we'll give our son a life full of love, respect, and stability, something I never had. One of the first steps in severing ties with my family was changing my last name. I didn't do it right away because I feared it would seem too drastic or meaningless, but over time, I realized my last name was an anchor to the past, and I was ready to let it go. Standing in the courthouse, filling out the forms, I felt an unexpected relief when the judge approved it, as if I were finally closing a door I'd been too scared to fully open. I chose a surname that meant something to me, a name tied to a personal hero rather than my family tree. Hannah supported me wholeheartedly, even joking that she'd take my new last name once we married, saying we were going to create our own legacy. Forging something new, separate from all the pain and betrayal, became my priority. Since cutting ties with my family, I've heard snippets about their lives, not out of self-interest, but because mutual acquaintances sometimes share details. Update: my parents have officially separated. Dad now lives in a small rental on the outskirts, and Mom is still in the family home, trying to keep up appearances. Dylan and Emma have suffered the consequences of their actions. They're in debt, and their marriage is growing increasingly unstable. The irony is striking. After destroying me, they're now the ones struggling to stay afloat. As for Mia, I've been told her fiancé left her months before their wedding. I don't know all the details, and frankly, I don't care, because she chose to side with Dylan and Emma when it mattered most, something I can't forgive. The last time I had any direct contact was over a year ago when Mom sent me a letter begging me to reconnect. I didn't even open it. I tossed it in the trash. Any remorse they feel now is theirs, not mine. One of the most valuable lessons I've learned is the importance of setting boundaries. For a long time, I let my family manipulate me, make me feel guilty, and force me to forgive them, taking responsibility for their problems. Cutting ties wasn't easy and came with complications, but it was the only way to truly move on. I sometimes wonder if they ever look back and regret their decisions, if they think about the pain they caused, or what they've lost by betraying me. I'll probably never know, and that no longer matters. What matters is that I've found peace. If anyone reading this is going through something similar, know that walking away from toxic relationships, even family, is not easy, but sometimes it's the only option to protect our peace and build the life we deserve. We aren't obligated to keep people in our lives just because we share DNA. I've learned that a true family is one that supports you, loves you unconditionally, and shows you that you matter. With Hannah by my side and our little one on the way, I finally feel at home.